Hello, my name is Vin, aka Lucentai, and today I'm going to be going over cleaning up marker scans in Photoshop. You can pretty much use any version of the Creative Suite. However, today we'll be using Photoshop CC 2018. But the fundamentals pretty much apply to pretty much every version of Photoshop. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So I've prepared a few scans, and notably as one of my succulent marker drawings. These are in Copic marker. These are all done on an A4 sized marker pad, which is a little larger than 8.5 by 11, which is my scanner size. I believe it is pretty much similar to 9 by 12 inches, and as a consequence, sometimes I have to adjust things when I scan because the marker pad does not fully fit the scanner bed. So some distortion can happen, especially around the edges. We'll demonstrate some of that distortion right here. So I had the bright idea, many air quotes around that, of drawing right up close to the sheet of the paper. I accidentally inked a little too close for this rose. So I had to actually scan this in two halves, which gets a little messy, but it is doable. It's manageable. So today we're going to be going over cleaning up three different scans. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. So this is a succulent drawing I made 2 months ago, and as you may notice, there's some stuff on the sides here. Notably, my little marker, or I'm sorry, my little pencil notes on the side here. So if I actually did want to present this, I would probably want to knock out some of this information here. Now, you can see the grain of the paper. However, if I were to just upload this as is, it probably wouldn't be the most ideal way of presenting this work. So what I would probably want to do is first of all knock out the side information. So what I'm going to do is simply go ahead and just knock it out really quick. So I'm just using a hard-edged round brush. So of course, what you're going to notice is that just by simply going over with a base white brush, is that the background is going to be different from my pen lines here. So I'm sorry, my brush lines here. But so I have a variety of techniques I like to use to clean up the background. And one of those is the use of adjustment layers. This is distinguished from just simple image adjustments, in that image adjustments are a destructive workflow, whereas adjustment layers are not. So if we go to image adjustments and start tweaking some levels, oops, I need to go ahead and actually merge these layers together and go ahead. If we were to attempt to do some levels right here, it's going to affect the whole thing. But once I confirm, I can't really go back. So in this particular case, I have, technically made the background white, but I've also lost a lot of other information as well. So that's one thing we'll have to be cognizant of as we're adjusting the levels of the piece. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to show you the most straightforward sort of way I go about doing this, in that I take the magic wand tool and then I click on this background. So I click on that. So you notice pretty much the vast majority of the background has these dotted lines, meaning it's selected right now. However, we can do a little better than that. So we can go ahead and add onto this. And what I did was that I held Shift and left clicked to add to the selection. So what I'm going to do is continue adding to the selection. I want these specific areas of the background to be knocked out and to become basically white. So you might have noticed that I accidentally have extra areas selected. That is because this is not an airtight marker. This is not an airtight ink space. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and fix that. And we're going to go ahead and refine our selection. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this Polygonal Lasso tool. And I'm going to left click. I'm going to hold Alt and then left click, which will subtract from the selection. So we're going to go ahead and knock this out really quick. Double click to close that selection. And if you so chose, you could also just use the regular lasso as well. The Polygonal Lasso can result in some finer control sometimes. But if you want to actually, control very tight space without having to get really nitty gritty with it, sometimes the Polygonal Lasso tool is the way to go. So for instance, I could attempt to trace this with the regular lasso tool, but instead what I'm going to do is go ahead and just use the Polygonal Lasso tool and just go ahead and isolate this inner part of the leaf that's being selected. So basically all I'm doing is I have Alt held down as I'm left clicking. And once you double click, you're going to close the selection. And so basically that's going to make sure that part of the leaf is not knocked out in the next step. Because I basically only want to have the background selected right now. So we'll go ahead and fix up this leaf as well. So now that's not being selected. There's a little bit here that's being selected as well. So we're going to knock that out. So as you can imagine, cleaning up marker drawings, it does take a little bit of persistence, but honestly, it's well worth it. So that's definitely a point where using the Polygonal Lasso is going to help when you actually have sort of polygonal areas that can be easily selected. So once again, I'm holding Alt, left clicking, and then to close that selection, I'm doing double left click. But this is another situation where it's going to help by double left clicking. So that area's knocked out. So instead of doing an adjustment layer, what we're going to do is press this button right here. This is a shortcut for adjustment layers. I'm going to go ahead and do levels. And so you can kind of see two things. One is that we have a levels window that pops up here. Two, we have a mask. This mask is really, really important because basically it means that all the white parts of this mask are being affected by this layer, and all of the black areas are not. And the way I got into this view is I held Alt, I left clicked on the mask, and that's going to let me go into the mask and sort of see what's going on here. And if you really want to fine tune things, sometimes it's easier to use this view as opposed to the other one. If you double click this part here, we get to go back to this levels window, and that means we get to take this and then adjust the sort of levels of the background here. So if I do that, it completely knocks out the background. If I do this, it's going to darken the background. So it sort of depends on what effect you want, right? So in this particular case, while having a darker sort of background would actually result in a sort of actually interesting effect. The intent was to knock this background out. So if you hold Alt and left click, if you hold Alt and left click on any one of the visibility icons in Photoshop, it's going to hide everything else and then show your original. So you can kind of see there's some areas that need a little bit of tweaking here. For instance, I didn't catch this. So what we're going to go ahead and do is click on this mask thumbnail that lets us edit the mask. And so I'm going to go ahead and actually use a black brush, and I'm going to just simply knock this out here. So all I'm really doing is editing the mask. So you can see I'm editing the mask like right here. So there's some kind of interesting consequences of just knocking out everything so starkly by dragging this slider all the way down here, and that is you get really harsh edges, which is not really how the original marker was, right? So there's a little bit of interpretation to be had here. You can do like a lower opacity brush, and so you actually have to excuse me. I think I'm not technically using a round right now. I'm actually what it is, I'm using a mixer brush instead. So this is where interpretation comes into play. We don't necessarily want to have hard edges because that sort of negates the whole point of cleaning this up in the first place, right? So this sort of relies on your interpretation, and sort of like how much of the original you want to retain. So if we take a lower opacity brush, we can sort of start bringing back the original's graded edges. And then what you can do is that you can go with even lower opacity. I can hit X to make sure to flip my foreground background colors. So remember that white means that the mask is in effect. And the mask's intent is to brighten the background. So by using a white part of this mask, I'm going to knock out parts of the background. Whereas if I use a black, I'm going to bring back parts of that background. So in that regard, I'm not entirely encapsulating the original's feathered edges just yet. But we're getting closer. We can go ahead and up our opacity for certain strokes as well. Though when it gets down to it, you probably don't have to get too nitty-gritty with it. This is like really fine-tuning parts of these edges. But at the same time, we don't necessarily want really harsh parts of this, right? So I want to make sure that parts of this look a little softer, because arguably that's part of the point of using marker in the first place, to sort of have a softer look. And of course, doing this on paper in the first place is to sort of have that paper texture, right? Which brings us to the next point. So we've knocked out the background, right? However, we still have this sort of grain in the middle here. So while it technically looks cleaner, it doesn't exactly have a consistency, right? So we have pure white on the outside, but we have a grain on the inside. So you can either leave that as is, or in my case, what I kind of like to do is actually do another levels layer and just very barely tweak it, just to create a bit of a cleaner look overall. Because if it weren't for this extra layer here, things look gray inside here, but white outside here. So we can try to even that out a little bit. Of course, we don't really want to overly do that because you're going to wash things out. And you're not really going to retain the original look of your background. I'm sorry, of your original drawing here. One thing you can also do with this adjustment layer is actually clamp the range so that overall things look a little darker. What I tend to prefer is to not do that. However, it ultimately depends on the effects you want. All of this is sort of subjective in a way. So, in some regards, this is kind of washed out. So I probably want to actually knock that back down a little bit. But overall, we definitely have a cleaner scan. Of course, if you get down to if you really want to tweak things, parts of this signature are still a little, how should I say it, a little messy. So you just go back in with a little small brush and tweak it. That's like a really nitty-gritty thing, though. And if you were so inclined, what you could do is actually go ahead and tweak things inside of this mask. So if I were so inclined, I could start cleaning this up. It just might take you a little while is all. So I'm going to go ahead and bring some of that grain back in. This is an example of a harsh edge. So what we probably want to do is feather that a little bit. And once again, so you can sort of see the result of our feathering. If you go into mask view, once again, it's hold Alt and then left click on the mask thumbnail. So another sort of tweak that we can make is to take a look-see at the bottom here. And that's pretty dark, while the top is lighter. Part of that probably stems from just not having that area selected, but if we were so inclined, what we could do is make yet another levels layer. And we can name this one gradient. The reason for that is that what we could actually do is create a mask just for a specific bottom half of the drawing. So what I'm going to do is create another mask. So all I did was that I just went to the gradient tool, held shift, and then did a left drag. So we want the mask to affect the bottom area here. So what I'm going to do is hold Control and hit I to invert the mask. And so if we do this, what you can do is actually just impact the bottom here. The area is knocked out. And these areas, this is completely non-destructive. So if we were so inclined, we could bring back the original scan. Of course, there's a little bit of distortion here from the scanner flatbed. Actually, this is part of it as well. So ideally, we would want to make sure the scanner flatbed doesn't have this stuff on it before the fact. But we're already kind of here, so we can go ahead and actually what I'm going to do is undo what I just did and just let the levels take care of it. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some distortion here. So I can name something like spot cleaning. I'm going to use a lower opacity brush just for a more feathered look. But yeah, sometimes the little details kind of add up, so it definitely helps to clean up the scan. It's just that sometimes you also don't want to completely knock out the original grain either. So that's just highly contingent upon what sort of effect you want to create. And actually we'll go ahead and just bring back some of my original grain. Yeah, so that's sort of the vast bulk of what I typically do to clean scans. Of course, there are little tips and tricks in here that will show in the successive scans as well. So I did my inking a little too close to the top. So a little bit of a hot fix is if I really were so inclined, I could just add a little bit to the top there. This is also a good way to check to see if there's any sort of distortion before you upload your scan. So actually, I'll go ahead and go on to the next point, which is if you can check the sort of distortion of your and the sort of noise of your scan if you just expand the boundaries of the image a bit. So for instance, just by doing that, I can tell that this is completely white and my scan has some distortion in it. And so what we'll go ahead and do is undo that. We're going to go ahead and clean this up. And as you saw before, I inked way too close to the top, and I actually had to scan this in 2 halves. So what I'm going to do is paste this bottom half here for now. We'll save that for a rainy day. We're going to go ahead and clean this layer really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and just take 100% opacity. And just kind of knock out the top here. Because there's no reason to have any of this part of the scan. This is from the top of the sketchbook. And so we can just kind of knock this out. So now we're all sort of on to the same business as before. We're going to do a magic wand and click the background. So one thing you can do is adjust the tolerance. The tolerance lets you see, lets you adjust how much is selected when you actually left click on the background here. So if I make sure this is totally white in my foreground, and then if I click, if I do the 0, it will only affect areas that are directly equivalent to white. But if I do 12, it's going to start selecting a little more. If I do like 33, it's going to select even more than that. Of course, as you can see, it'll just start selecting areas that I may or may not actually be intending to select. But that will do for now. So what we're going to go ahead and do is a Polygonal Lasso this away. So that's gone, because we don't want this part of the flower to actually be selected. So we're just gonna knock it out really quick. We don't want this area to be selected as well. There are some other techniques you can use for selection. This is sort of a rather rudimentary way of doing it in some regards. There are other things that you can also do as well. So that was actually probably not the best idea. But, so you can kind of choose what, suits your taste. Yeah, for now we'll go ahead and keep doing this. But there are actually other selection methods that are more efficient. So you can sort of experiment with Photoshop's different selection methods. But in my particular case, I like having the manual control. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing that. One notable aspect is that I have the anti-alias button, the anti-alias checkbox turned off. And the reason for that is I want to have a hard edge selection. I don't want to have any sort of feathering. So we're going to go ahead and keep selecting. Because once again, our magic wand selection was selecting parts of the of the foreground, which we don't want. We want to only select the background. So if we were to actually go ahead and do an adjustment layer right now, we're going to knock out part of this area right here. So if you didn't necessarily want to actually do a polygonal lasso the whole way through, what I could have done is that instead I can use black, which means the mask will not be in effect. And I can go ahead and just do this by hand as well. So you can kind of find the method that suits your tastes. You could find the method that works best for you. So in some areas, if it's like a really tight-knit spot, you might just want to go ahead and create that mask and create the mask and go ahead and brush out the rest. So with this mask, we knocked out the background. So as you might notice, again, there's parts of the center that are still kind of grainy. And what we're going to go ahead and do is actually implement the second half of this before we're doing any large-scale global tweaks. So what I'm going to do is do a canvas size. Let's give it 13 inches. I'm sorry, I meant to do height. Actually, that's good that we did that, because now we can see the distortion on the side. So let's go ahead and do 12 on the for part of the height. So the anchor lets you choose where that height is going to be, and height and width will be extended from. Oops. Relative. I did the wrong thing. Sorry. What? That's fine. There's some distortion on the side, so if I were to just blindly upload this to Twitter or something, you're gonna see that, and that's not the greatest thing in the whole world. Actually, what I should have done is also do this on the top as well. So there is a lot of distortion at the top. You can't see it when you zoom out, but when you get inside, actually, that's actually just a Photoshop error, I think. Well, regardless, we can go ahead and just knock that out. And so, yeah, we have this former scan from before. It's like, oh my goodness. So you might be wondering how we're going to, like, hybridize these two scans. It's actually kind of a challenging thing to do. But for starters, what we're going to do is click the mask button. So not the adjustment layer button, but the mask button. And we're going to go ahead and create a mask to knock out this top information that we don't really need. So the amount you drag it determines how far that goes. So you can kind of go for a really, really sharp gradient. So you notice how we kind of have this going on here. I'm going to go ahead and knock that down further down. So one tricky thing is that, as you might have noticed, my top scan was actually not completely set in the cardinal direction, so it's actually kind of messy in that regard. So you can try to rotate this half. This sort of just honestly just boils down to having a really good skin to start with, though, honestly. So we actually don't need too much of this information up top here, but we're going to go ahead and knock this out. We really only need the bottom, so we actually don't need too much of this over here. So once again, I did a gradient to sort of have a soft edge, so I can knock out, I can start knocking out parts of the skin that I don't need. So you might notice a bit of fuzziness. We can go ahead and use a black brush to just knock that out. So this is a simple mask. If the mask is black, that part of the layer is just gone. And if it's white, it's going to come back, which is not what we want right now. So you notice a good chunk of this is actually pretty good, though if you inspect it in depth, you might notice a bit of distortion. Notably over here. But because this scan was real, these two scan halves are not completely level, and the more you try to rotate things, the more distorted you're going to get. So you want to try to start with better scans. The best scans that you can. Yeah, so there's definitely some parts of this that deviate from the original in some regards. If you were to really, really inspect it, you'd be able to tell, but you sort of want to just minimize that sort of distortion. We could try to clamp this top half in a spot that'll be hard to notice. Seeing as, yeah, it's definitely still kind of janky in some regards. Still better than before where we had a lopped off bottom though, right? So yeah, if we were so inclined, we could definitely try to rotate this again. But we've already kind of rotated it once, and once again, the more you rotate things, once again, that's actually what, I'm sorry, that's with Control T that will activate the transform gizmo. The more you rotate things, the more distorted things are going to get. So you kind of want to try to not do that too much. But for the most part, this is pretty accurate, so we'll go ahead and just keep rolling with this. So actually what I probably should do is go ahead and drag our original mask to the top, and what I can simply do is just add on to that. Whoa. Because the reason why this is black on the outside is because we did a canvas size adjustment. So by default, that's not really going to be part of our mask that we designated. I think if you set your background color, it'll affect what comes out. So if I did 13 and 14, oh, actually no, it'll stay not part of the mask. Hold Alt and left click on this, and it's going to bring this back. So actually, there's a little bit of distortion here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bring this back. Click on the mask. Actually, So actually what happened is that I knocked out some of the scan when I wasn't really looking carefully. So we're going to kind of just hit E and just bring that back. So obviously we don't need all this space, so we'll go ahead and do a selection marquee. Crop. And now we can start doing those global sales scale adjustments. So we're going to go ahead and we can just name this top half scan. We're going to start doing some global adjustments. We're going to click this adjustment layer button, go to levels, and do a very, very slight tweak. So of course the danger of doing this too much is that you're just going to knock out your original marker drawing way too much. And you don't want to do that. You want to make sure there's a nice balance between having a clean digital processed image and the original scan. So there's still a little bit of grain here. So I think that kind of suits that sort of pays respect to the original marker drawing without getting without losing too much information. So actually spot cleaning, and we're gonna go ahead and knock this part out. So in terms of like some of the shortcuts I'm using, I am holding control, holding spacebar, and that activates the a quick zoom tool, and then if you drag left drag to the right, it zooms in. Left drag out, it's going to go out. So this is actually part of this top scan. So yeah, the order of your layers is pretty important, of course. We can start inspecting areas that need a little more feathering. This is one of them. This is one of them. So I'm holding Alt, right click, and then dragging for a quick brush size increase. And if you're using other tools such as Clip Studio, Paint, they're also very similar quick zoom and quick brush size shortcuts as well. I think in Clip Studio, I think it's it's Control Alt left drag for brush size. I believe that is also configurable as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of a bit of the pencil here. If I were so inclined, I could actually knock that out. But for now, I think that's actually okay. What we probably want to do is, go ahead and oh, free me. Sorry about that. I am in fact on Windows 8.1 for some strange reason. So we can go ahead and knock this out. Yeah, so it's not really 100%, as there's certainly some things we could tweak. However, for the most part, I believe we've encapsulated the original scan marker drawings information without losing too much information in the process of cleaning it up. So yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next scan then. Actually, one more thing. Okay, so let's go on to the last one. And this is a drawing I actually just did yesterday of my friend Jamuko's cat, Sumi. A very, very pretty cat. And a beautiful buddy too. However, my scan has a few idiosyncrasies in it. Notably that I didn't really rotate the sketchbook the right way when I scanned it. So go ahead and do a 180 on it. So I, again, didn't necessarily have the best positioning, so we're going to go ahead and compensate with that, compensate with processing the image. We're going to go ahead and do another spot cleaning layer. Go hit B to go to brush. Knock this part of the flatbed scanner out. So of course, in an ideal world, we want to be using paper that perfectly suits the 8.5 by 11 inch scan area. However, I just love that particular sketchbook a lot. So I am willing to deal with a few distortions in the process when I scan. One of those distortions is actually that there's a bit of a blurriness over here. And that is because the sketchbook is off of ever so slightly off of the flatbed because it is bigger than it. So what I would have needed to do is make 2 scans. However, we'll just have to make do. So as a bit of a spoiler warning, for that scan I uploaded on Twitter, it actually does in fact have some distortion, but it's all good. So in this particular case, I'm actually going to go ahead and Control E to combine these layers, and we'll go hit W. I'm sorry. We're going to go ahead and do Shift W to go to the other tool that has W as a shortcut. That is the magic wand. So this, like, all this area that is white or close to it, according to my tolerance setting, we're going to go levels. Knock this out, and for the most part, it gets the point across. However, you'll notice that I'm losing some of the feathering on my edges. So you know the drill. We're gonna go ahead and bring some of that back. So I'm gonna use a black brush. And bring back some of the feathering on my edge. So once again, black means that the mask is not present, and white means that the mask is present. And the point of the mask is to knock the background out. So we want some of this. Actually, honestly, I could be using a lower opacity brush. So you can bring back some of the feathering of the original. I'm sorry, the feathered edges of the original. So these whiskers are really harsh looking. So we're going to go ahead and feather some of that back. You can use a smaller brush. Because quite honestly, the original has a bit of softness. Now, some of this is from the distortion from the scan. But what we're going to do is bring some of that softness back. So again, in an ideal case, I would have done 2 scans. So you just want to pay very, very close attention to how your scans are working out. So one thing I've consistently not been doing is magic wanding the parts of my signature. Okay. So here's a very, very good cat. But we want to bring back some of the original feathered edges. So now we can do some more tweaks with the canvas size. I want a little more space on the left, so we'll go ahead and set the anchors appropriately. And what we're going to do is go ahead and crop things out. We're just going to crop out the stuff that we don't really need. The inside is got a bit of gray as well as grain. So once again, we're going to do levels and just knock some of that out. So this is not really a perfect skin. There is some distortion from the sketchbook being off of the flatbed scanner. But without another scan, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. We're just going to have to make do with what we got. And, okay. And if you were so inclined, you can go ahead and actually get really into this if you were so inclined. You could really knock out very specific parts of the drawing. But yeah, that's basically how I go about cleaning up marker scans. This is the original. This is what we've got, original, and what we've got. So yeah, that's pretty much how I process things in Photoshop. Going from magic wand to creating a mask for an adjustment layer, to tweaking things by hand, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. Shoutouts to Kiwi-Kamikaze for the idea to create this tutorial. Again, thanks to Jamuko for allowing me to use my drawing of Sumi the Cat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to recording more processes in the future. But for now, thank you very much for your time and take care.